On a mission to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. This is the YWCA Hour with your hosts, YWCA Executive Director Karen Bell Dancy and YWCA Associate Director Maisha Essex. Welcome in to the YWCA Hour.
Hello and welcome back to the W. I am Karen Bell Dancy and with my co-host Maisha Essex from YWCA Lincoln. During the month of March, we have been talking about women's history because this is the 1 month of the year that we get to really highlight women in history and especially women's contributions to our great nation. And today we want to delve into a little bit more, one of the more significant movements in the history of this country, which is the suffrage movement. However, Maisha, it's been so interesting as I've been doing some research around the women's suffrage movement, is that this was not just a movement that was happening within the United States. This was really happening worldwide. And so a lot of the traditions that we have here in our country, of course, because pretty much everyone here are immigrants, right? They are bringing some of the traditions and habits and beliefs from their own home countries. And with that, it was that women had a place. Women can only aspire to do certain things, which typically was to get married and have children. And women did not have the right to work. Women did not have the right to own real estate, did not have the right to vote. And so once women came over here to the United States, started to feel, well, we need to have more rights. And a lot of what spurred this notion with women around them having the right to vote was a lot of women started to become opposed to slavery. So the women's suffrage movement is born out of women that felt there needed to be into slavery and we need to get into civil rights. And so women felt that if they could push the notion that they would have the right to vote, then they can start to make some changes and to promote humanity. And how noble of a cause and a thought that was. So right around the turn of the century, in the early 19th century, the suffrage movement was born and women started to actually become agitators. And as I said a few minutes ago, this whole agitation was against slavery. And one of the women who's really noted during this time as to be a true abolitionist was Lucretia Mott. And so she wanted to prove to the public that in speaking out against slavery, that it would be for the betterment of the whole country. And so Lucretia, as well as Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they all joined forces. So just imagine during that time, right around the turn of the century, we didn't have telephones. Yeah. We did not have text messaging. There was no social media. You know, how these women were able to communicate and to be able to talk freely and get messages across to each other, and actually being from different points around the nation to say, we need to come together because we need to address a lot of the inequities that's happening and different type of suppressions that's happening here within our country. And so it was in 1848, my goodness, 1848, that they actually, in Seneca Falls, New York, they came together and formed a convention, and the suffrage movement was really born. And so the suffrage movement during this convention, their goal was to expand on the rights for women for education, employment, and also for the right to vote. And so this being the first national convention of women here in this United States. And also Lucy Stone was one of the conveners of this. And this whole group of what we would call suffragists came together in these different conventions. So they were, as you imagine, they're all up north.
Right.
They're above the Mason-Dixon line. The North was more progressive in the anti-slavery movement. And from this, they started to really gain their voice. And of course, Susan B. Anthony being another one of the leaders of this women's movement. So this is how this women's movement became born and started to gain not only support of more women around the nation, but then there were also some men, and mostly those out of those progressive northern states,
Yeah.
that believed in this movement and gave strength to the movement. And they started working on the amendment around the right to vote.
Very great history. Thank you, Karen, for sharing with us how we came about in regards to the women's suffrage movement and really the history behind that. We take for granted now because
Right.
it's something at this moment
Yes.
that that a lot of us are just able to go and do. We take for granted all the hard work and the journey that it took, or that these women had, for us to be able to vote today without any theoretically any issues
Yes.
in regards to the right to vote. It's so great that you mentioned some of the women pioneers in regards to the women's suffrage movement, including Susan B. Anthony and Staten.
Yes. Yes.
And then you mentioned at the end Ida B. Wells
Yes.
and Ida B. Wells Barnett.
Right, right.
She got married and hyphenated her name.
Yes.
But we know that we honor those women who had that vision and that passion and commitment to us having equal rights here. But we also know that there was this piece called intersectionality of race,
That's
right? And that even within this movement, while they did liken it to slavery and anti-slavery at the time of just humans not having rights that we're supposed to have, that in that movement, you also had people who still believed, and I say women, who still believed that there was a hierarchy in which,
true.
Yeah,
Very true.
in which people should be allowed to vote. And so there is some controversy around, Staten and Susan B. Anthony.
Yes.
And the controversy is that they, made it public at some point and known and had this sentiment that white women deserved the right to vote before
Thank you
black
for
women
bringing-
and black men.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that point out, Maisha, because we are still early in the 19th century.
Yeah,
And as you said, that hierarchy still really did exist.
it did.
So while we're talking about the strength of women and them bringing their voice out, we still had a differentiation in different levels as to women and then women of color.
Yeah, and whose
having
voice,
the same rights. And
Yes.
who is it truly representing?
yeah, and whose
Yes.
voice deserved to be heard, and there was an order to it. Like,
Yes,
we should get ours.
exactly.
We should get ours first. And so
Mhm.
we knew in 1870 that like African American men were granted the right to vote.
Yes.
However, we know because of poll tax, literacy tests, fear tactic, Jim
Right.
Crow laws,
Yes.
that they really couldn't exercise that right to vote. And
Mhm.
so while technically, yes,
Mhm.
black men did have the right to vote prior to women, we know that a lot of things happened to where they were unable to exercise that
Mhm.
vote. And within this women's suffrage movement, you talked about, I don't think you mentioned the march, right? We all know
Right.
about the march in
I was going to so great.
in 1913,
Yes.
where it was the women's procession march, right?
Mhm.
And you had a lot of women from across the country come and participate, just as a demonstration for women being able to vote. And in this march, as we talk about the hierarchy and things like that,
Yes.
black women were required to march in the back. So they were able to come and march, but they had to march in the back. And we can look back and honor and be grateful for the Black
Mhm.
women that's decided to go ahead and be in that march, because
Yes.
we did a lot as Black women in regards to the suffrage movement, a lot of work. And so we deserve to be at that march and represent it. And when we look
Mhm.
back, it is on record that we were there.
Yes.
And so we did have women
Yes.
who participated, young women, young college women that went out
Mhm.
and participated in that suffrage movement.
Mhm.
March.
March. Yeah.
And the reason why they did that was to appease Southern white women, so that
Mhm.
they would come out, they wouldn't abandon the march.
Right.
And so to appease them,
Mhm.
they made that rule that Black women could participate, but they just had to march in the back. But however come, there was one woman who decided, I'm not okay with that.
Okay.
Okay. And
This is where it gets interesting.
this is where it gets interesting. She said, I am not okay with that. And so
Mhm.
she started out
Mhm.
where they said she should be, which was in the back.
In the back.
But as soon as that march happened, she ran to the front. And she went to go stand by the delegates that were representative of her state.
Right.
And she stood by them and marched in the front. And that woman
Mhm.
was Ida B. Wells
Ida B. Wells.
Barnett.
Mhm.
And so today I just want to talk a little bit more,
Love it.
about Ida B. Wells and who she was, and
Mhm.
how she really, really influenced the civil rights movement, the women's
Yes.
suffrage movement,
Mhm.
in regards to the Black
Mhm.
community,
Mhm.
and how she understood that in order for women to have right, truly understood it,
Mhm.
then we do have to deal with racism. And you know,
Mhm.
that's our whole mission.
Exactly.
That's YWCA.
That's
That's
who
the
we
reason
are.
why we decided to integrate that piece about elimination
Yes.
of racism,
Mhm.
because we also understood
Mhm.
that in order to ensure that women across the board have equal rights, that we must first have to
Mhm.
connect with the issue of race.
Mhm.
And I try to choose my words wisely and not say
Mhm.
barrier, right?
Right.
Because I don't like when people say
Mhm.
uh, say that their race is a barrier. I'm like,
Mhm.
it's not. Me being
Mhm.
Black is not a barrier for me. That's who I. There's
Mhm.
nothing that I need to get over, push
It's a
aside
barrier for the person
for the
that
other.
perceives
Yeah,
it.
say
Let's
that,
do
and it's
that.
your barrier,
Yes.
and it's
Yes.
your problem, and your barrier can, have a significant impact negatively on my experience in the world. It definitely
Mhm.
can,
Mhm.
but it is not my barrier.
And if we
Yeah.
remove that designation
But
and
it's
the
something wrong.
prominence of
Yeah.
what that represents, then collectively we are that's so much stronger.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
much stronger.
So I try to
Yes. Thank
the,
you
the
for
issue of
bringing
race
that
and
up.
not say that it was like our barrier or something like that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
I love this line, Maisha. You just led me to it. It should be noted, however, that in practice, poor women and women of color continue to be denied the right to vote in several states
Mhm.
well into the 20th century.
Mhm.
And that's why Ida B. Wells Barnett is so significant in this history,
Mhm.
because she sought to remove that stigma.
She
out of
did,
that.
and
Yes.
Ida B, just like when we talked about Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune.
Yes.
Let me tell you, she
Yeah.
took a stand,
Mhm.
and she said, "This is what I believe in," and she was unwavering
Mhm.
in her belief,
Very
and so
much.
that kind of got her.
Mhm.
Some people agreed, some people did not.
Right.
She was on a mission, and she was not deterring from her mission, and she was not going to change what she believed in. And so, if
Mhm.
you do not know, Ida B. Wells was a women's suffragette. She was an investigative journalist. She's really known for her journalism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
She was a leader within
Mhm.
the civil rights, and she just again embodied a lot, because at that time we needed to. It was really hard for us Black folks at that time to just deal with one thing,
Right.
because we still had that layer of being Black. And so
Exactly.
it's just you just can't be a women's suffragette. You had to also be connected to the civil rights movement,
That's right.
because of the the laws and the stigma and all of that. But Ida B. Wells was born in Holly Springs, Mississippi. She was actually born into slavery. She was freed by the Emancipation Proclamation like a few years after she was born. Her parents really valued, education, and so she was able to get her education. Unfortunately, her parents died, and I believe a sibling due to yellow fever.
Right. Yeah.
And so at that time, she had to kind of take on that care, take a role for the rest of her siblings, and she became a school teacher. And then eventually they moved to Memphis, and this is where she really got into journalism.
Okay.
And so one of her biggest topics that she liked or needed or wanted to research was lynching. She was big on anti-lynching. And so she wrote a lot of different papers and documented a publication, Southern Horrors. It's lynch law in all its phases. And it really looked at how white men at that time who were lynching Black people and Black men, they would say, oh, we're only lynching because they're criminals. Well, she investigated and no, you're not.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And so, and then her articles and writings and publications, they were really nationwide. They're gone out nationwide because Black newspapers, they would, add her articles into their publication. And so that was really becoming a thing because nationwide, we were starting to learn a little bit more about the horrors, as she called it, Southern horrors, and about lynching through her work. And so, of course, when that happened, not a lot of people are happy. And so, particularly white men. And so they went and kind of destroyed and burned down where her press and the newspaper station and where she was at. And so
this was still in Memphis?
Yeah, so it caused her to move, which we know she did a lot of her work in Chicago.
Right.
And so that's kind of how she got to Chicago. But I think another thing that was really interesting was a story about her making a trip, her daily commute prior to Chicago, making her daily commute in a train, right? So she bought a ticket to be in the women's section, and it was a first class ticket. She gets in the women's section, and they tried to remove her and say, hey, no, you have to go into the smoking section. And when she refused, they drug her off the train. And she said what kind of stood out in that moment were all the white people who stood up to get a better look at what was going on, who was cheering when he was dragging her off. And actually, she went on to sue the railway and won for harassment. And so she did win. However, I think at some point they wind up reversing it. But yeah, she did win for harassment.
Wow. What year was this? Any idea?
This was late 1800s.
Late 18. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
Wow.
Susan B. Anthony, once she got to Chicago, sorry, not Susan B. Anthony, I apologize. Ida B. Wells. Once she got to Chicago, she started the Alpha Suffrage Club, which really helped to engage in regards to voter education and getting people registered, Black men and women, getting them registered. We know Black men were able to vote prior, but again, with all the tactics that were put into place, a lot of help was still needed, at that time. And so Ida B, she was a part of many different groups, including the one that we talked about last time, which was the National Association for Colored Women. And we talked about who founded that organization.
Negro women, I think, wasn't it?
No, this is the National Association of Colored Women.
Colored women.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the
okay.
So one of the people that we talked about that were really involved in that was Dr. Mary Bethune. And so that's amazing how we keep connecting all these women together. So she was a part of that. We already talked about the Alpha Suffrage Club and the National Association of Colored Women, also known as the NACW. Okay. Yeah, and then the League of Colored Women, because there was a League of Women Voters, but because of her disposition in regards to Black women voting and Black and African American rights at that time, of course, there was some pushback, a little bit of pushback in regards to that, and so she decided, just like Dr. Mary Bethune, if you won't give it, we'll go ahead and make our own. So yeah, and so she went out and she helped to make her own. The other thing is that she's a founding member of the NAACP, right? Now, when you go and look at different sources, there's where we get a little. So, but actually, on the website for NAACP, they do have her listed as a founding member. But we know in was it 1909 when they had the conference in New York City, and it was the National Negro Conference, where she actually presented her work, and it was called Lynching Our National Crime. And so she presented her work, and that was like 20 years of research on lynching. And if we know a little bit about how NAACP came about from that conference, one of the biggest issues was lynching. And so her work was extremely pivotal, right, in providing a lot of data and research on it, because that was really what she was an anti-lynching advocate. So she really, really dug deep into that and did amazing research on it. And so from there,
the unspoken ugly, because there were so many states, even up until the 60s, that lynching was still occurring. And I'm not happy to report, but one of them was my home state of Missouri. So, and this is real critical information.
And so when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about Ida B. Wells and a couple other things that she did.
Wow. This is great. Okay. Well, thank you, Maisha. We are delving into the history of our country. If we don't know where we come from, we do not know where we're going. And so, again, this is Karen and Maisha for the W. We are talking more about the facts of Women's History Month.
When you need a new water heater, nothing beats the ProLine family of water heaters from A.O. Smith. ProLine models are built using commercial-grade components, meaning they're built to help you tackle your toughest days. No matter if you need a gas or electric model, A.O. Smith has a ProLine unit for you. A.O. Smith. Innovation has a name. Call Bryant at 402-467-1111 for a great deal on a water heater today. Again, that's 402-467-1111.
Well, it's the middle of winter, the holidays are over, and the weather is unpredictable. Isn't there anything to look forward to? You bet there is! Cash Blast from your Nebraska Lottery is back! Until April 1st, buy a 2x2 ticket and enter the voucher number online for a chance to win one of 7 weekly drawings for $5,000 or $500. And if your voucher is from a 7-day draw ticket, your prize is doubled. Hey, there's nothing like a little green to cure the winter blues. 2x2 top prize odds 1 in 105,000.
John Henry's has a brand new membership club to protect your entire home in one program. With a VIP and a deluxe option, we will help you find the plan that best fits your needs. Receive discounts on services and equipment, priority service, complimentary inspections, and so much more. Protect your home's plumbing, heating, cooling, and electrical systems all in one membership. Call John Henry's to learn more.
435-5555. John Henry's Plumbing, Heating and Air,
and Electrical.
Are you a skilled mechanic looking for your next big opportunity? Constructors is hiring. We're looking for experienced mechanics to join our family-owned team. We offer competitive wages, great benefits, brand new service trucks, OEM-level diagnostic software, and career growth opportunities. Positions include lead and A-level mechanics for our shop and multiple field technicians. If you're driven and ready to grow with a company that's been around since 1908, apply today at constructorslincoln.com.
Shopping for new flooring is different today. Getting your questions answered, making the right selection, getting the best value, and installed quickly and professionally. Visit ostreetcarpet.com or shop our store. We'll answer all your questions and help you make the right choice. You'll be enjoying your new floor in just days for less than you'd pay elsewhere. Carpet, vinyl, wood, laminate, tile, and area rugs. We've got it all.
O Street Carpet.
1732 O Street. Family owned and operated. Always the best value.
Unearth the secret to long-lasting tires at Tread's Central Tire Pros, a league apart in commitment, service, and expertise. This isn't just about rubber meeting the road, but trust, safety, and surety converging in perfect harmony. This is where expectations are exceeded every time. Make your appointment today at Tread's Central Tire Pros just south of Cortland on Highway 77, or visit our website to explore our services. Remember, when it comes to tires, choose Tread's Central Tire Pros because we tread differently.
Ticket listeners know a dream team when they see one. At Applied Connective, we've been in the game for 20 years and have developed a team of world-class leaders in all things IT. From cybersecurity and Microsoft products to physical security, audio-video, infrastructure, business phone systems, and anything in between. We'll help you leverage technology to become your most secure, efficient, and profitable. Head to our website to check out real reviews and testimonials and sign up for a free tech consultation. We can show you where you might be vulnerable, inefficient, or overspending. It's a game changer, and it's totally free. Claim yours right now at appliedconnective.com.
Back to the YWCA Hour. Here are your hosts, Karen Baldancy and Maisha Essex.
This is Karen and Maisha with the W, and we have been enjoying this history lesson that we're getting today, especially with a lot of the information Maisha has been sharing with us. And it's not just women's history, even though this is Women's History Month. This is American history. This is our national history, and it's a great civics lesson that we're receiving today. So, Maisha, give us some more information.
Yeah, so we would just talk a little bit about Ida B. Wells and her investigative journalism work on anti-lynching, and it really kind of started as she continued to go a little deeper into the research and become passionate about it, because one of her close friends actually was lynched. And so this really, inspired her.
It hit home.
Yeah, inspired her work.
Yes.
It having a personal connection to it. And then I don't know if we know this, but she had a pen name prior, which was the Brilliant Lola, or they also start calling her the Princess of the Press, which I think is absolutely
That's cool.
great, because she was, she was talking about doing something that was really dangerous at that time, which was writing about racial issues in regards to African American experiences here in this country.
Yes.
And so that is that was very, very brave of her to do that, because we know again that, people, Black people were killed for less, especially for speaking out and going against the system and what was established.
Right.
And so she did have a pen name at that time. But before we went to break, we were talking about the NAACP.
Yes.
And, her being a founding member, and how her work on lynching really helped in regards to the NAACP understanding the issue and then taking it on as part of one of their tenets as to why. And so I told you there was a couple of resources out there or sources out there that was saying just a couple of different things, but NAACP does name her as a founding member. She was part of the founding 40, because that's where the founding members came from, that convention that we were talking about back in 1909. And so she is a founding member of the NAACP, and that's the source I'm gonna go with, the one that's the actual NAACP source. One of the other sources was just she didn't, because of, again, not everybody has the same vision as to how we get it.
Right.
There was the same goal, but the same methods on how we get it could have been a little different. What needs to take place first could have been a little bit different. And what I told you is that Ida B. Wells Barnett, she stood in what she believed in. Right. And so, no one was going to change her mind about that. And so, but again, she is listed as a founding member of the NAACP, which is amazing. She owned her own newspaper, and she married, which is why we hyphenate, Wells Barnett. She married a man. He was a lawyer, but he also owned a newspaper, part owner of a newspaper, The Conservator. And so when she married him, she bought out his shares, and then the other shares from the other folks, and she became and she owned The Conservator. And so that was amazing that she had, and that's what she always wanted to do, was own her newspaper. And through that, she continued to do her work and research for anti-lynching. And it's her voice, right? Amplifying not just her voice, but also the voice and the concerns of Black people and Black people in many different facets. We talk about the suffrage movement, which she was very vocal about that, and women's rights, just as a whole, but then also Black women and what we have to face, and that we should also have the equal right, and it shouldn't be a hierarchy to when we get it with other women, and that we all should be, identifying with race and the issues that African American people were facing. And again, it was really calling them to the carpet because, like you said, and when you do your research, when you look at the women's suffrage movement, it's heavily connected to the civil rights movement or anti-slavery, movement. And so it was really, again, calling them to the carpet. Hey, this is what you all said, but you'll dig a little bit deeper and you see that some of the people that we know and that we are so grateful for who were heavily involved, some of those pioneers in the women's suffrage movement also had their bias and ideas of how we should get it and who should get it.
And who should get
it. So again, it was her calling them to the carpet and standing in what she believed in. That's why, not even just standing, running in what she believed in, because she ran to the front of that march. She did not stay back there. She ran to the front of that march and said, I will be up here where I belong as a delegate from my state. As a Black woman, we are women in here trying to get rights, and so we are all on the same equal playing field. And so
it takes just one.
It takes just one to be the example. And so not only did she do that, she was also through her publications and investigation, she even looked at how African American men were treated in the Army, and had talked to President Wilson at that time. And so it was just, again, very, very interesting as to how far and how deep her compassion and commitment was to equality, particularly for the Black community. And we are so happy, again, to just talk about Ida B. Wells and her contribution to the women's suffrage movement. But like what we'll say for every woman this month, that it will go past the women's suffrage. It passed one thing with Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. It went past just teaching. It was so many other things that we have to connect with because of the issue with race.
And thank you for pointing that out, because when we think of women's suffrage, we typically think white women, right to work, right to vote. And it goes so far beyond all of that. It's the educational pursuits. It's child care. It's the ability to own things. And then, but it means something different when we start to look at it through that cultural lens as well. And so I really appreciate you pointing that out, Monisha.
It does. And sometimes when you do look back at it, you will see, again, like Staten and Susan B. Anthony and all the great work that they did, the Women League of Voters and all the great work that they did. But sometimes it's hard to connect the Black women who were a part of that movement as well, because even after, we still was fighting racial inequality. And so just like with Black men, they had the right to vote in 1870. You don't really see that coming about until the 60s, where we are still fighting the 50s and the 60s for the right to vote, even though we were granted that prior. And so that's why sometimes you can't connect it, because it didn't happen. It happened in theory.
That systemic discrimination will still exist.
It's still, and that's why you can't just say, we'll just make it better for all women. That's not what this policy, it'll just lift all women. It will not. If you do not connect with the systematic racism and barriers that are put into place so that all women or all people of color cannot succeed. And so I think that was just a great point that you just made in regards to it. We couldn't see it. We just couldn't, because it was in theory. It wasn't in practice until we got into like the 60s.
Exactly. And that's why so many of those organizations that were created back then, they got to a point where, they're not as quite effective because they're still not rooted in equivalency for everyone. And so I think about the National Organization for Women now, that was supposed to be so profound and so prolific for women, but there were still a lot of barriers because of the color barriers that were existing at that time as well. So thank you for bringing that up. So, yeah.
And she went on to, talk across the world and make speeches across this country, again, about lynching and different rights that were being prohibited to certain communities, whether it was women or Black folks.
Wow. And Maisha, you brought up another point. I do not want us to miss the emphasis of that is she had a conversation with President Wilson. Mm-hmm. And so it reminds me of Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune.
It was like how many advisors? 4 or 5
presidents. So just stayed in that history and that understanding right now, these women being as brave as they were, risking their lives, literally risking their lives and that of their families, and advising these presidents. So here again, you have this Black woman with the strength and the perseverance and the commitment to making equality the thing for everyone, and she's out advising the president of the United States.
She was talking to him. Yes. She was bringing these issues to his, documenting them and bringing it, to his attention that the way that African American men are being treated is just not right, of course, in the war. And we know this. Again, this is just all those levels of intersectionality. Like going to war, fighting for your country, and still being treated less than.
Right. And so that brings me to, and I know we're delving in the women's history, but that brings me through Jim Crow and Black men, having to march and carry signs, I am a man, and, all of those things around equality. All of the critical movements are born out of ignorance and that need to suppress one group so that another group feels that they have the power, control, superiority. And so we keep moving from movement to movement to movement. But circling this back to women's history, we always have a woman that's in the mix that is really strong and real critical.
Absolutely. And, I think it's really great, as we said before, about highlighting women's history because it goes unnoticed.
Yes.
And, when I was doing my research on Ida B. Wells Barnett, and I really liked it because it speaks to the experience of just woman and then Black woman here in the society, that a lot of her efforts, they weren't really highlighted until after she passed, after she passed.
Right.
And so, but we know she did so much for the movement and in the community, civil rights movement and the women's suffrage movement. She did so much. She was a very pivotal voice in our community being heard and seen. Again, she was writing articles. She was investigating. Like she really was putting pen to paper so that this will be in history what's going on and data and research so that they can see the numbers. She believed in that too. Sometimes they need to see that, well, here are the numbers.
Right.
She did her research. This is what's happening. No, you're not just lynching Black people. Criminals, which is just insane because why was Black criminals lynched but not white ones? So just if it was a whole, you know what I mean? Like, so, and again, having those conversations and bringing that data to the forefront to the nation. Look at what's going on. You will not silence us. You cannot silence us. And when you won't give it, and I love it, just same as the women we talked about last time, we'll make it. If you want to invite us to the table, we'll create our own.
Right.
And we'll show everybody in our community and other communities how possible it is, even when somebody is trying to oppress you. Look at what we can still do. We can make it all the way to the ear of the president,
right?
To be able to speak, because our voice will be heard. No matter how loud we have to scream, how long we have to scream, we'll keep doing it until we're heard and we're respected. And so we can look back as women and as Black women and say, that's my shero. She inspires me. If she can do it and make it, I can do it and I can make it. Here, that there's always a way. There's never just we're sitting in this and this is what we should do. I had someone tell me, well, why don't we just accept it? Like, we can't do. And it was, and it was like, we can't do anything at this moment. You know what I mean? So basically, why fight it? We really don't have the power to make change. And I'm like, and the person who said it to me was, a white man, right? And, I can understand where I understand that No, we're good. But I
I
understand. It's not even that I want to help, but like I do understand that his resolve is just beaten down, right? Because he's not used to this life as a white man who decided I'm going to be in the fight for this. It almost makes me think of Target, right? Soon as it comes really hitting, why don't we just Okay. And so that's what it was. And I said, well, we don't have the option to do that.
Right.
We don't have the option. This is who we are. We can't just say we're not going to do anything and just let it happen to us. This is our livelihood. This is our health. This is so much to us that we can't just sit around. If everybody had that attitude, nothing will change. We have to keep going.
We don't push against.
And this is our heritage, our lineage. We're talking about it now. This is why we continue to do this work. We continue to push forward. I know a lot of us are tired in this moment, right? Especially Black women. We always say
right now,
Black people, 92%, we did that. So I get it because it is tiring, right? To continue to fight this fight. But one thing that I do know, because of the history of who we are as a people, we'll do it. And we'll continue. And so just bringing her to the forefront, we are so thankful and grateful for all the work that she did, all the trauma and hurt and pain and obstacles that she had to overcome to get our voice heard and to document our experience here. Again, the dangers to her life, to her actual life and her family, that she still said, I'm going to keep pushing, right? Because you and I sit here today.
Exactly.
Because of of what she's done. I can go out and vote, which we know we have one coming up here, an election coming up here in April. So, but I get to do that. I get to participate in what was a right, that again, calling America to the carpet.
Well, because of that, the amendment was changed.
Yeah.
And so,
but it was all right from the get-go.
Right.
That's calling America to the carpet. It was all right from the get-go. You just decided to take it away.
Exactly.
So, just being able to just honor her in this moment is amazing. So we'll bring it right back and we'll talk about one other person.
Thank you. And we will be back.
Empower a child today with the Teammates Mentoring Program. Hope is only a conversation away when you choose to share your talent, time, and heart with the child. Together, you can build a relationship based on strengths and chart a brighter future, 1 week at a time. Find out how you can be a mentor by visiting LincolnTeammates.org. Become what you needed as a kid by joining the Teammates Mentoring Program today.
Shopping for new flooring is different today. Getting your questions answered, making the right selection, getting the best value, and installed quickly and professionally. Visit OStreetCarpet.com or shop our store. We'll answer all your questions and help you make the right choice. You'll be enjoying your new floor in just days for less than you'd pay elsewhere. Carpet, vinyl, wood, laminate, tile, and area rugs. We've got it all.
O Street Carpet.
1732 O Street. Family owned and operated. Always the best value.
Back to the YWCA Hour. Here are your hosts, Karen Bell Dancy and Maisha Essex.
Hey, thanks for coming back to the W with Karen Bell Dancy and Maisha Essex. We enjoy, as you can tell, we enjoy so much working for the YW in our mission, the elimination of racism and empowerment of women and girls. And this month we have been talking about so many historic figures in our history that are women and the contributions that these women have made, contributions for change, contributions for social justice, equity, all of those great things that some actually fear, which is so amazing to me. And we have enjoyed learning about these different women. And Maisha is going to share the history of another woman that we need to highlight in our history in this fight for social justice.
Yes, Sojourner Truth. So we're coming down again.
Dispel the myths, please, Maisha.
Yes, we're coming down to the last few minutes. And when we think about women's right and we think about different pieces and speeches, a lot of us can relate to Ain't I a Woman speech. And we all love this speech. Sojourner Truth speaking about, these so-called differences, but you know, of men and women. But I feel like we do the same thing. What's going on? And so the myths behind it, and I am comparing the two speeches. You can go and do your own research, even with the Library of Congress. There are a lot of sources that will let you know that there is controversy around the speech. I am citing a lot of the information from the Sojourner Truth Project and about the different versions of the speech. So we all know it and love it and came to Ain't I a Woman, right? That speech. And the controversy around it is it's not accurate. It's extremely inaccurate. Actually, it's a controversy around it. Is that it was not really a transcription of the speech that Sojourner Truth gave. And one of the biggest myths is that Ain't I a Woman was never in the speech she gave in the first place. But it's you know, but it's what we know. Like if you talk about that's what Sojourner Truth, right? You know, she gave the speech. She asked Ain't I a Woman, and that is believed to be added to the speech, and it was Francis Gage's version of it, which is the most popular version because of the Ain't I a Woman, and in that version, they say it's really inaccurate because it was written 12 years after the speech was given. Like
a whole 12,
and so they're like, it's not really a transcription of what happened, and also she kind of added the Southern slave dialect to the speech as well, and a lot of different things, including Ain't I a Woman. It is really popular. I do believe it gets across the same message as the transcription. But we can say that it was inspired by. I think that's like a more accurate way to look at Francis Gage's rendition of it, is that it was inspired by, because Marius Robinson is quoted again with the source that I'm using as the person who actually wrote the transcription, which I believe they wrote the transcription just like 2 months or something after she gave the speech, and that they knew each other, Sojourner and Marius, and that it is believed that she approved of his version of it. And so again, there you can definitely find both versions on the source that I'm using, which is the SojournerTruthProject.com. You'll find both of the transcription and then the rendition of it. So I am actually going to read both. I think they're really both, again, they get across the point. I believe that Ain't I a Woman is really powerful, which is why I think it landed so well with everybody. But again, it was inspired by and not necessarily an accurate transcription. The transcription goes, may I say a few words? I want to say a few words about this matter. I am a woman's right. I have as much muscle as any man and can do as much work as any man. I have plowed and reaped and husked and chopped and mowed. And can any man do more than that? I have heard much about the sexes being equal. I can carry as much as any man and can eat as much too, if I can get it. I am as strong as any man that is now. As for intellect, all I can say is, if women have a pint and a man a quart, why can't she have her little pint full? You need not be afraid to give us our rights, for fear we will take too much, for we can't take more than our pint will hold. The poor men seem to be all in confusion and don't know what to do. Why, children, if you have women's rights, give it to her and you will feel better. You will have your own rights and they won't be so much trouble. I can't read, but I can hear. I have heard the Bible and have learned that Eve caused man to sin. Well, if woman upset the world, do give her a chance to set it right side up again. The lady has spoken about Jesus, how he never spurned woman from him, and she was right. When Lazarus died, Mary and Martha came to him with faith and love and besought him to raise their brother. And Jesus wept, and Lazarus came forth. And how came Jesus into this world? Through God who created him and woman who bore him. Man, where is your part? But the women are coming up, blessed be God, and a few of the men are coming up with them. But man is in a tight place. The poor slave is on him. Woman is coming on him. And he is surely between a hawk and a buzzard.
Wow.
That is
So much profoundness.
right. And that is the transcription from Marius Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
That is to believe to be more accurate
Mm-hmm.
than what we know as Ain't I a Woman.
Right.
And as you can hear from that transcription, Ain't I a Woman was never in it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'm going to read Francis Gage's Ain't I a Woman?
12 years later.
12
Okay.
years later,
Ready.
Ain't I a Woman? And I'm going to try to get all the dialect there. Well, chillin', where there's so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think that twixt the niggas of the South and the women of the North, all are talking about rights. The white men will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there say that women needs to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helped me into carriages or over mud puddles or given me any best places. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could hear me. Ain't I a woman? I could work as much as, eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. Ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen them most all sold off into slavery. And when I cried out with a mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. Ain't I a woman? Then they talks about this thing in the head. What this they call it. That's it, honey. What's that got to do with women's right or niggas' rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint and yours hold a quart, wouldn't ye be mean not to let me have a little measureful? Then that little man in the black there, he say women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Where did Christ come from? Where did Christ come from? From God and a woman, man had nothing to do with him. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all on her own, all these together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. And now they is asking too. The men better let them. Bleg to ye for hearing on me. And now old Sojourner ain't got nothing more to say. And that is
Wow.
And that is Francis Gage's rendition.
And it's still recited as such.
It is.
And attributed,
And
incorrectly.
It is. But I can say again, because of how it's connected with the movement and women's rights, that maybe the language should be that this piece was inspired.
Exactly. I love how you frame that. That's right.
Speech.
Yes. Yeah. And today is still relevant
because
today the fight for civil rights is more prevalent as ever.
And women's rights.
And women's rights in particular.
Yeah.
So, wow, how very profound.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up today. I think that was a perfect note to wrap it on. Just, I am a women's rights.
Yep.
Or ain't I a woman?
Ain't I a woman too?
Yeah. So thank you all for listening.
Yes. And we'll see you next time. The W, Karen Bell Dancy and Maisha Essex.